Hello, welcome to Locked on Sharks, the premier hockey podcast of your favorite team in the Bay Area. On today's episode, we ask one more big question. That is what to expect for an encore from Erik Karlsson. So all that and more on today's episode of Locked on Sharks.
You're Locked on Sharks, your daily podcast on the San Jose Sharks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm your host, JD Young, contributor at San Jose Hockey Now. I want to thank you for making Locked on Sharks your first listen. You can follow or subscribe for free wherever you get podcasts. And of course, you can catch us on YouTube as well, where the episodes drop first. And so that way you also make sure you guys are subscribing so that way you know whenever a new episode comes out. And on today's episode, I wanted to kind of finish up with the big questions surrounding kind of the biggest names on the team by talking about Erik Karlsson, right? He's coming off a record-breaking campaign, being the first defenseman to score over 100 points in 30 years in one season. I want to kind of look at what to expect next year. So I crunched the numbers, pulled up the Excel sheets or the Google Sheets, pulled them up, crunched the numbers, and we tried to kind of dive into what to expect by looking at other defensemen who've been over a point per game since the lockout and kind of try to figure out what type of season should expect from Erik Karlsson and use that as the Sharks kind of try to make that decision if it's going to be time to try to move on from Erik Karlsson this offseason, which there are plenty of swirling about trade rumors, or maybe hang on to Karlsson because this might just be kind of the beginning of Erik Karlsson's resurgence and his renaissance. So what we're going to do first, of course, is we're going to kind of dive into Erik Karlsson's season, look at his numbers, look at his analytics, then going to dive into how he compares to some of these other players. And then at the end, try to kind of figure out what type of season, that Karlsson will have and start to have that should he stay, should he go type of conversation. So let's dig into Erik Karlsson's numbers. If you're watching on YouTube, of course, the slides make a return. Erik Karlsson played all 82 games last year. The first time he has done that in quite a while, to be honest. It's been a long time, actually. Not too bad, but last time he's done it since the 2015-2016, where he has played all 82 games for his team. In those games, of course, he had 25 goals, 76 assists for 101 points, 209 shots on goal. He played 25-37 this year, which is up from what we have seen him basically. It's the most we have seen since he's been in San Jose. The 15-16 year, he averaged almost 29 minutes a game for the Sens, which is just absolutely bonkers. But this is the most amount of ice time that we have seen him play in San Jose. Corsi for, our shot attempts while he was on the ice, 53.59%. Goals for at 5-on-5, 50% of the goals. So, again, just absolutely outrageous numbers. Pulling up his hockey card from The Athletic. His salary, of course, he's entering. So he just finished up year 4 of his $11.5 million AAV salary. Market value of 14.9. You could argue Erik Karlsson is underpaid. Please give that man more money. So ice time, he was 90th percentile. Goals, 100th percentile. Assists, 100th percentile. Points, 100th percentile. Expected goals, 97 percentile. Penalty differential, 86 percentile. Offensive usage, 99 percentile. Defensive usage, 15 percentile. That's always been the argument with Erik Karlsson is the amount of offense he provides far outweighs the lapses on defense that you get from him. just absolutely bonkers numbers from Carlsson, like McDavid-esque numbers from him. Pulling up his evolving hockey, again, the same thing, right? 99th percentile offense, 5 percentile defense from him. And most of his damage is done on 5-on-5, which is what we saw all season, right? While he is an effective power play guy, is what he does on 5-on-5 that makes it so special. And again, with majority of the game being played at 5-on-5, he is just that. I know you're going to see if you're looking at the goals allowed above replacement, the expected goals allowed above replacement are both kind of the -6 area. The offense is just so ridiculous that it, like I said, it's triple. So the goals above replacement for Carlsson, basically he provides 18 more goals than a average goal or defenseman. Expected goals above replacement, 24. So he's, if you have a -6, he's still doing 4 times the offense for every bad defensive thing he does. So his ice time, of course, he plays way beyond top line minutes. All the power play doesn't play. He only played 31 shorthanded minutes. That's fine. I love what David Quinn did this year, putting Carlsson in the best position to succeed, of, kind of limiting his practices, especially early in the season when he's kind of dealing with some bumps and bruises. Kind of the load management when he's not playing, and that way he could be 100% ready for the games. And we saw that bear out with Carlsson and him playing every game since the first time since 15-16. I don't expect that to be something we see from Carlsson going forward. He's never going to be Brent Burns, an Iron Man type of player. But if you can try to limit his ice time, especially penalty kill, you can find plenty of guys who can play penalty kill for you. And then with the practices, if he needs to skip a practice here and there, it's Erik Karlsson. He knows exactly what he's doing every time he steps on the ice. So that doesn't mean Erik Karlsson gets free reign to do whatever he wants, but I think it's that building that working relationship between Carlsson, the strength conditioning team, and the coach, Ryan Warsofsky, who runs the defense, and David Quinn, just making sure everyone's on the same page about having Carlsson. It's more important to have Carlsson there for the actual games, and we see how special he can be. So before we dig into what to kind of expect going forward from Erik Karlsson, do need to take a quick break, talk to you guys about our friends over at eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to a vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can make sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit, or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, so we saw Erik Karlsson, right? 101 points, 25 goals, 76 assists. Probably going to win the Norris. I would be surprised if he doesn't win the Norris, especially hitting that century mark. So I wanted to see what happens next. And I went from the lockout on because I wanted kind of more modern hockey, but still wanted a big sample size of players, since the lockout, the 24-25 era, we have gotten 11 seasons where a defenseman has scored averaged at least a point per game. So I wanted to kind of use that as a threshold, which player, these are the cream of the crop usually, right? So we have gotten now 3 Erik Karlsson seasons, 2 Cale Makar seasons, a Roman Josi, a Brent Burns, a John Carlsson, 1 John Carlsson, 2 Mike Green seasons, and Nicklas Lidström at 35 years old, still putting up a point per game. What an absolute legend. So what I wanted to do was kind of look at how these guys performed in that first season where they put up 100 points because we had a couple. Carlsson and Mike Green did it in back-to-back years. So Mike Green did it 08 to 09. He was a point per game. And then 09 to 2010, he was a point per game player as well. So I wanted to kind of see that second season, see how they would kind of perform after that. Same thing with Carlsson. Like I said, he was a point per game in the 15-16 season, and then 16-17, he was also a point per game. So first thing I did is I looked at how many games missed, right, to kind of see what type of drop-off is expected. And most of these guys, you saw that second year, they missed more games. Brent Burns, of course, never misses a game. He and Mike Green, Mike Green and Nicklas Lidström either missed the same amount of games, which is 0, or they had a better attendance record, I'll call it, going forward. The average, so I did is I looked, averaged them all together. The average was they missed 5.5 more games than they did the season before. So we'll kind of go through and some of the numbers here, and then I'll pull out some interesting stuff going forward. The goals, same thing. Most of the players, you saw a decrease in goals with the exception of Erik Karlsson. He had 1 more goal the second season. Everybody else dropped in goals, and that was an average of 6, a little over 6 goals that second season. Assists is a big one here. So everybody except for Mike Green dropped in assists the next year to an average of 17.25 assists. So 17 assists less than the previous year. Points wise, everybody dropped with the exception of Mike Green, who actually had 76 points in his second season, where he was over a point per game. Everybody dropped on average by 23.5 points. So basically 24 points they dropped by. And their points per game by average dropped by 0.2. A lot of information there. Basically, of course, right? When you hit the peak, there's only one place to go, and that's down. Mike Green, Erik Karlsson, and Cale Makar were the only players who had a point per game and able to repeat a point per game the next season. Problem is, Cale Makar's 23-24. Mike Green, when he did it, was 23-24 as well, and Erik Karlsson did it 25-26. So what I wanted to do is I took the averages of what I called all the olds. And I also forgot Victor Hedman did it too. So I think I mentioned everybody. So I wanted to get all the olds. So basically all the guys who were, everybody else was in their 30s when they did it, and wanted to kind of see how their season, because I think that's a more, especially for the Erik Karlsson, who's going to be starting his age 33 season next year, how they did. Actually, the numbers were a little bit different. So the average games missed was only 4.5. So basically you get an extra game from them, and that would make sense. By then, as a veteran, you kind of know how to take care of your body a little bit better. Goals dropped was 5.6. So not as bad, but the assists going from 17 assists drop to 26.5, basically 26.5 assists that they dropped down, and then 32 points that they dropped. So their points per game dropped by 0.31 points per game that they dropped. So what does this all mean for Erik Karlsson going forward? So if we just take the averages, kind of look at what to expect, right? So if Erik Karlsson, this year he had 25. If it's all the averages and we see Erik Karlsson kind of play it again, he should average, so he should only play 76 games next year, 76, 77, depending on, so don't expect Erik Karlsson to play every game, but 76, 77 games kind of feels the average. Roman Josi was kind of the worst defender, and Cale Makar actually too dealt with a lot of injuries this year. But so if we see Carlsson, miss a couple games this year, boom. Average second season for his goals. So he had 25 this year. For everybody's numbers, he would drop to 19 next year. And if you look at just the olds, he would drop to 19.4. So we'll say 19 goals. All right. Erik Karlsson, again, 76 assists. Everybody's numbers together, they average out to 59. He would have 59 if you took, taking the 76 and taking off the 17 assists. So that would give him 59 assists next year. If you just look at the olds, the 26-point drop-off, that would put him at 50 assists next year. So the olds, and then that will put him at for his points. If you look at the average of everybody, if he can just maintain the average of everybody, he'd be at 77.8. So we'll just say 78 points next year, which will put him at 1.03 points per game if he plays at, that 77 games. So just still over a point per game, which would be another great season. If you look at just kind of the old players, that will put him at 69 points, which would be 0.923 points per game. So that's the that's kind of what the average type of season coming off is. Erik Karlsson will probably be around 19 goals next year, 19 goals next year. And somewhere around 50 to 60 assists. And that's going to put him between right around 70 to 80 points again next year. So not a huge drop off. Like if you just said, hey, Erik Karlsson is going to get you 80 points next year, you're probably going to be pretty happy with it. But again, going from the season we saw this year to next year, you have to be realistic about what to expect from Erik Karlsson. So before we continue and dive into what the Sharks, just start to dive into what the Sharks should do with Carlsson going forward. Do want to take a quick break. Thank you guys for making Locked On Sharks your first listen every day. Every dayers, next week, we're going to be starting our Mike Grier deep dive. We're going to be looking at all the transactions Mike Grier's done, all the signings he's done, looking at David Quinn, his coaching hiring, and seeing how the Sharks have gotten better or worse compared to Bob Boughner. You're going to look at, all of his free agents, his drafts, kind of start focusing on what how Mike Grier has kind of changed and put his fingerprints on the organization now that he's been here, not quite a year, but he's been through the first season. So you're going to make sure you guys are following along wherever you get podcasts and, of course, on YouTube as well. All right, so if we have one Erik Karlsson, if he drops in that range, 70 to 80 point range, if he's somewhere in there, is he still worth it for the Sharks? And I think that's going to be the question that Mike Grier is going to have to wrestle with going forward, is just how important, we know how important Erik Karlsson was, especially him putting up points for the Sharks, right? If you didn't know the Shark, there was 26 games this year where Erik Karlsson did not put up a point, which seems kind of crazy for a guy who put up 101 points. That's basically a third of the games he didn't score at all. And in those games, the Sharks went 3-21-2. So they had 3 wins, 21 losses, and 2 overtime losses. Just bonkers, just how important Erik Karlsson is to this team going forward. So I struggle with this because I think this is, if you wanted to get out of the Carlsson contract, he still has 4 years left at $11.5 million. That is a huge number, right? And the Sharks are probably going to have to eat some of that cap, and we'll have plenty of opportunity to look at potential teams for Carlsson to go to. But Erik Karlsson's still really good at hockey, right? He's going to win the Norris Trophy. It's not like if you take Erik Karlsson off your team, no matter how you spend that money, your team's still not going to be as good as they are with Erik Karlsson. And that's what I struggle with, because it's not like they have somebody you can't point to be like, oh, they have, Shakir Mukhamadullin who's ready to slide up and play NHL, play Erik Karlsson's role. Like that's not Mukumadula's not ready, right? You don't have a guy who can come in and just who's ready to kind of take that role. And then you'd have to kind of go out in free agency and try to find someone who can, a John Klingberg or somebody like that, who Klingberg had a terrible year with the Ducks this year, but you have to try to go out and find somebody who can kind of at least be your your top defenseman who can run your power play, right? If you don't have Carlsson, it makes everybody else worse, right? Your power play is going to suffer. Your 5-on-5 is going to suffer. Like, the Sharks are going to be out just atrocious next year. Even if Eklund and Bordelot and whoever else you add in come in and hit the ground running. And that's tough to expect all those guys to kind of come in and hit. We'll talk about the signings, but look at, Mike Greer's signings, right? We saw sweet Matt Benning. Matt Benning was a good signing. Nico Sturm was a great signing, but Luukkonen blew out his knee in December and was okay before. Oscar Lindblom was a disappointment. For every good signing, you're gonna probably have one that's bad. That's just how the averages work. So, I personally would try to run it back. I would have Erik Karlsson I would keep him going one more year, and then you can see how it goes, right? If Carlson's having another great season, awesome, cool. We have Carlsson who's kind of showing that he can do it again. And then you can go into the next offseason with only 3 years left, and maybe try to trade him then. Or maybe Carlson's just good again for a while. That's also a possibility. There's a huge number of possibilities. There's also the possibility that Erik Karlsson is just bad again, and then you miss your opportunity to try to trade while his stock was at its highest. And that's also a possibility. And that's the game that unfortunately Mike Greer is going to have to play. But I think the big thing that we can take out of this is looking at all the averages and looking at all the numbers. Yes, there's going to be a drop off again. Expecting Erik Karlsson to go out and put out another 100-point season on this team it's a lot to ask for. But I think Carlsson can still be around a point per player game, and that's still a very, very valuable thing. Again, there's only been, since the lockout, there's only been 11 seasons where we've had defensemen putting up a point per player game, and Erik Karlsson's done it 3 out of the 11 times that it's happened. So Carlsson is a special offensively gifted defenseman, and the other guys, Cale Makar, who's shaping up to be a generational talent, right? He's done it twice before the age of 24. And then Mike Green, who was, if you don't remember Mike Green was amazing for the Caps for a very, very long time. And then John Carlsson, who again kind of is playing with Ovechkin helps, but he's been kind of took the mantle from Mike Green eventually type of situation. So, and some of these other guys on this list, Victor Hedman. Victor Hedman last year was a point per game player. This year, not so much, but I think you can also point to, they made 3 cup runs in the past 3 years, and just that many games starts to kind of wear on a guy. Erik Karlsson hasn't had that problem. Unfortunately, we're not playing for cups right now, but Roman Josi, right? 96 points, dropped down to 60. And I think he was the worst case scenario, but he missed 15 games this year with an upper body injury. And the Preds, kind of started to sell at the deadline, even though they barely missed the playoffs. But you saw them moving pieces out, especially after right around when Roman Josi got hurt as well. So, and there's a lot of signs pointing to, I know, Timo Meier isn't on the team anymore, but there's a lot of signs pointing to where the Sharks can still be good offensively. And if you kind of figure out something with the goaltending, you can kind of squint your eyes and be like, okay, I can see this team being more competitive. And it's much better, but you can see this team being more competitive than they were this year. And if Erik Karlsson can continue to be, float around that point per game player mark, you can kind of see where it could be. So my heart says that they trade him, or my heart says to keep him. My head says I think they trade him right now, and that's April 20th right now. But there's a long off season and, plenty of time to get there before we do. So I'm sure I will talk myself in and out of this between now and kind of the draft when something might actually go down. So, or that draft week. Right. But, again, I think we will see Carlsson. There will be a dip in numbers, but I don't think it will be as dramatic as maybe people were expecting. And I think if Carlsson continues to stay healthy, I think he'll still be productive, and we'll be looking at a potential flirting with another point per game season from Carlsson next year if everything goes well. So hope you enjoyed my deep dive into Carlsson. There's, asking that big question of what to expect. I think we get another point per game season from Carlsson next year. It's going to be really close, but I think he's going to be flirting with that for his Encore season. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure you guys are following along. Make sure you guys are subscribed wherever you get podcasts. Leave a nice review on Apple if you're an Apple listener. Again, we'll be back next week. We're going to start diving into Mike Greer's first season, dig into the trades, dig into David Quinn, dig into the free agent signings, dig into his draft, see how those guys are kind of doing right now. So yeah, until next week, bye friends.